Over the last few weeks, I've presented 4 lessons that have to do with the heart of man. And if you place that in a biblical context, you know that I'm not talking about the little pump that's in your chest that pumps the blood through your body. I am instead talking about the spiritual heart, or maybe more effectively, I would simply call it the mind of man. The spiritual heart, the heart that the Bible speaks about so much. In the first lesson that I presented, we talked about the role of the heart in conversion, changing from a sinner to one who is a disciple of Christ. In the second lesson, I studied with you what the Bible teaches about the role of the heart in our behavior, how what we think affects how we behave and how we approach things, what values we have, and what priorities we set in life. In the third lesson, then, our study was about the role of the heart in worship, and that worship actions are not acceptable to God and are really not worship in a literal sense, in a true meaning of the word, unless those actions come from the heart. And then this morning, lesson number 4 had to do with the role of the heart in our relationship to God, how we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart. Now then, tonight we change gears just a little bit and look at something else the Bible has to say about the heart. I'm intrigued by the writings of Solomon in Proverbs and enjoy reading from those Solomon or those Proverbs and all of the writings of Solomon about the behavior of man and the attitude of man and what happens to man and how man keeps changing through life and searching for the things that would really bring him satisfaction. Solomon was such a man himself. He was a man who tried to find the key to life. What was life really all about? Remember, he was the one who had been given more wisdom than anybody had ever had. He was also the man who was blessed with great riches. His wealth was just unbelievable, to the point that anything he saw that he wanted, he got it. He was just at that level. And he surrounded himself with all forms of things and people to bring pleasure and happiness to him. And his conclusion after getting all of that, after amassing it all, was vanity. He said, it's all vanity. It's meaningless. And he said one of the reasons it's meaningless is because you just can't avoid that moment when you're going to die and leave it all for somebody else. They'll have it and you will be gone. So what good is it, he said, if you don't get some kind of benefit out of it while you're here and now? If you're not able to enjoy the fruits of your labors, what good is it to you? Now, it may be of benefit to somebody else, but what good is it to you? So Solomon was one who searched through life for the real meaning of life and what happiness was all about. And he concluded his writings in the last chapter of Ecclesiastes in chapter 12, verse 13, saying, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Now that's the King James Version translation of it. In the American Standard Version, it's more literally translated, leaving the word duty out. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. Is this me? It's me. Okay. All right, Jay. I might as well stop. Everybody stopped listening, so we're trying to figure out what it was. Do a little thumping up there or something, and see if it'll get a little better with us. We've had a little bit of interruption with it earlier today. Okay, resuming my thoughts now. Solomon said in the American Standard Version, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. The word duty is left out, and that simply conveys to us accurately the meaning of what Solomon said, that the whole of the entirety of man is really wrapped up in pursuing what God wants him to be and fearing God and keeping God's commandments. That's what man's existence is all about. Now, later on in some of Solomon's writings, in Proverbs 15:15, for an example, he said, the man that has a cheerful heart has a continual feast. The man that has a cheerful heart has a continual feast. And that doesn't mean that he sticks his head in the sand or that his head is above the clouds, that he doesn't see reality, that he just ignores everything and hopes all the problems will go away. It just means that in spite of all of the problems that he will confront in this life, he's still going to maintain a good disposition, and he will just have a good countenance. And a man who is of a cheerful heart has something more valuable or even more effective than medicine itself, he said in Proverbs 17:22. And in the passage that was read for us earlier, Hiawatha read from Philippians the 4th chapter, the Apostle Paul said, rejoice. Period. That's it. One word sentence. Rejoice. Then he added another sentence saying, and I will say it again, rejoice. It's obvious that God means for his people to have a cheerful heart, for us to have a cheerful countenance. The Greek word from which the word rejoice is translated there is translated actually and literally of a cheerful disposition, a calm happiness. Doesn't mean that you're just going to go berserk with your happiness, because that kind of happiness doesn't usually last. There are other things that have to enter in order for there to be an ongoing happiness. But God means for us to be happy people. Are you happy? Do you have a cheerful heart? Are you a person that could, in the biblical sense of the word, be described as a rejoicing, happy, contented, cheerful person? In the biblical sense. Have you ever noticed how we as people, how that is one of the main motives or drives and behind most of the things we do in life? Walk up to a mom or a dad that has a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 17-year-old. It really doesn't matter the age of the child. And say, what do you want for that child? What do you want for that child in life? And I can pretty well predict the answer. It'll include most of this, if not all of it. Well, I want my child to have good health and be safe. I want my child to get a good education. I want my child to be successful and have the things that he needs. I want him to be right with God. But what did I leave out that's always there? I want my child to be happy. I want my child to be happy. How many times have you heard a mom and a daughter in a real face-to-face confrontation, really conflicting over something that they've been wrangling about for days and days and days, and they don't seem to be able to break through that communication barrier, and finally one blurts out to the other one, well, what do you want anyway? And if it's mom asking it, the daughter will maybe say, I just want to be happy, mother. Or if the daughter's the one asking it, she may phrase it like this, well, what do you want out of me? I just want you to be happy. Now, maybe they're not even on the same planet, so to speak, in their communication at that moment, but they're both looking for the same thing. And so many people are that way. They don't really know where they're going to find it. They don't really have the key to it at this moment, but it's one of the things that drives and motivates us. Somewhere there's a boy tonight that thinks that if he can just become a man, he'll be happy. But somewhere tonight, there's a man who thinks if he could just go back to being a boy, he'd be happy. Somewhere today, there's somebody leaving home, just got to get out of there, feeling that if they can do that, they'll find happiness. But somewhere else, there's someone rushing at breakneck speed to get home, just to be happy. The man that lives in the country wants to move to the city. The man that's in the city wants to move to the country. The man that's working can hardly wait till he retires. The retiree is looking for something to keep him occupied. All of them looking for something that'll bring happiness. And a part of that is because we look for it in the wrong places and we look for it in the wrong things. So many people think happiness is found in things. If I can just get this, I'll be happy. Or if I can just have that, then I can be happy. If I can buy this or build that, then... But those things don't always bring happiness, because there's usually a strong surge of discontentment that comes once the newness of the thing wears off. Solomon wrote about that in Ecclesiastes 4:8. He said, the eyes of the rich man are never satisfied. Now, he didn't say the eyes of a poor man. He said the eyes of a rich man are never satisfied. Because it's that old principle that the man that has 1,000's wanting 2, and the man that has 10 wants 20, and the man that has 1,000,000 wants the second 1,000,000, and so on it goes. The eyes of the rich man are never satisfied. And things within themselves do not bring happiness, genuine, lasting happiness. And one of the reasons for that is because they're not constant and they're not permanent. Other people think that happiness comes through physical pleasure, through some sort of sensual satisfaction. And there's a very sobering statement made in the Bible in Hebrews 11:25 about Moses in that regard. And you recall how Moses refused to be called Pharaoh's because of why? He didn't want to put himself in that position to enjoy the pleasures of sin, because he knew it'd be just for a season. It was only for a season. Some boy and some girl may check into a motel room and take liberties with each other's body in a sexual way, and in their sexual involvement bring each other to physical enjoyment that they would say is beyond the description of words. But it can only last so long. And in a little while, the pleasure subsides. And then they have to deal with the reality of what they've done. Life and enjoyment and happiness and contentment and satisfaction has to come from some other source than the sensual and physical pleasures that we got. Some people think that happiness depends on other people. That's a mistaken idea of what happiness is. If my daddy would just, or if my mother would, or if my wife would just be this way, or if my husband would quit doing this, or if my children can just, and then we base our happiness upon the behavior or the accomplishments or the abstinence of others. But you see, the problem with that is that we can't control what other people do. And people will disappoint us, and people will play out on us, and people change, and life changes. So that's not where the happiness is either. In a true sense of the word, happiness is a serendipity. Sort of a byproduct. It's what comes to you as the result of other pursuits. You don't just pursue happiness itself, you pursue other things. And to have happiness inside, to have a cheerful heart, have that merry heart that doeth good like medicine, there has to be the pursuit of higher and more noble things. to illustrate. The Apostle Paul said in 2 Timothy 2:15, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." There's one of the keys to happiness, is to focus yourself upon the approval of God. Because unlike people, God doesn't change. He's constant. He's consistent. He's steadfast. And unlike people, He's our judge. And if you and I can achieve the approval of God and have His stamp of approval, so to speak, as if He were to say, "I approve. I like what you're doing. I like the way you're living. That pleases me. It honors me." There is nothing that brings satisfaction and happiness at all like that feeling when you can know that you are living in a way that God approves. But I'll tell you this, I don't care how much money you have, and I don't care how high up the ladder of industrial success you climb. I don't care how many people you have flocked around you, patting you on the back, telling you how great you are. If you know in your heart, that is our subject, if you know in your heart that your life is displeasing to God and that you're unacceptable to God in your behavior and attitude, there is not going to be any real happiness or contentment. It just won't happen. And another key to happiness is staying busy in those things that really count. You know, there are people that are busy. Frosty the Snowflake Man time, don't you remember that magician? Busy, 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 you know. But that didn't matter. I can tell who's been watching that and who hasn't by your reactions. It doesn't matter how busy you may be or not be. What counts is, are you busy doing the things that matter? Ooh, I like that word. The things that matter. There are people in this audience that have said at various times in your life what I've said at various times. You let a crisis hit, and the one that comes to my mind most immediately is now 11 years past. But boy, when Rhonda had that wreck and almost died, it sure had a way of putting things in different perspective. And she and I talked about that in her hospital room later when we knew she was recovering. That some of those things that you think matter so much, all of a sudden do not matter at all. And some of those things that you have just taken for granted all of a sudden matter more than anything else. But happiness, real pleasure, comes when you know that you are pursuing, or you're busy in, you're active in those things that really matter. Key to happiness. Stay busy in what matters. And another key to happiness, I think, comes from the words of Jesus in John 9:4. When He said, "I must work the works of Him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work." And I think that's one of the keys to happiness, because it focuses your attention on this: that procrastination invites unhappiness and misery, because you're so unhappy with yourself, you're discontented, you don't feel good about yourself, your ego takes a bruising, because you know you've neglected things that you should have attended to. But if, on the other hand, you are busy attending to those things that count, that matter, and you're keeping your priority list in order, that's one of the best ways in the world to feel good and to know that you're successful. Buy the books, or just go borrow or get from the library. Just check out a book from the library about the most successful people in this world. The quest for success and achievement and all of those CEOs that are studied and surveyed from time to time. And you know what? They all have a number of things in common, but one of the things they have in common is that they keep before them a priority list. They start every day with that list of things to do, but at the top of that list of things to do are those things that must not be neglected. There's that list of 3 or 4 things that has to be done if everything else is let go. Now, if you were to make a list of the 10 things you need to do in the next week, and then you were going to filter through that list and put the 3 things at the top, what would be there? That even if you don't get the other 7 things done, what 3 things must not be neglected? A husband or wife or a father or mother sits down with a list like that, and in a moment of calmness, with some rationale, you know what filters to the top. But you see, if you don't think along that line, and if you're not careful and you just react from day to day to day, you do all of the gotta do's, all of those urgent matters, but you somehow end up neglecting the really important things, the things that really matter, and then you don't find happiness. You've been busy, but you're not happy because you're not doing the things that you know really count. By the way, just as a little thought here, could this maybe be a clue as to why a lot of us as Christians are not really happy? Why there are a lot of sour faces and gloomy faces on Christians? That maybe we don't really pursue the things that really matter, and so we don't really find the happiness that God intends for us to have. Another thing that I find is a key to happiness comes from the attitude of the Apostle Paul in Philippians 4:11. And before I quote that to you, remember what the Apostle Paul was like, and what his life was like. I'm not talking about before he was a Christian. I'm talking about after he was a Christian. After he became a Christian, what did he have to do? He had to suffer. He went to jail. He was beaten with rods. He was beaten with whips. He spent so many nights in prison. He was shipwrecked. He was stranded on islands. He was bitten by vipers, snakes, or whatever they were. His brethren abused him. His brethren falsely accused him, not to mention the things that were said so hatefully about him by those people out of the church. And then in the middle of all of that, he said, I've learned, whatever state I'm in, to be content. There's one of the keys. Because folks, there's so many things in life that you can't control. Life is such a ever-changing circumstance. It's a series of changes. And the people who adjust the best are the ones who make it the best. And when you blend in with that, the fact that there always are people that will be ugly, hateful, despiteful, You know, the ones I'm talking about. You have them in your life. I have them in my life. People that are the real stinkers of this world. And they're just hard to get along with. But you can't control those people. And there will always be that type of person in your world. So your happiness can't depend on getting rid of those people. Your happiness can't depend on just changing every one of them. Happiness depends upon adjusting and coping with those people. And you're not going to always have the circumstances you want. We all have those great days, don't we? Those days when everything goes right. At least it seems that way. But we also have those days, bad hair day doesn't even begin to describe it. It's a bad day in every way. So what do you do then? How do you deal with that? Well, you see, we have to understand that when we talk about being happy, we're not talking about being happy about everything that's going on. I'm not happy about our men having to be in Bosnia. There are a lot of things, a lot of circumstances in this world right now that I'm not happy about. Things that are happening to some friends of mine that I'm not happy about. But that doesn't keep me from having happiness or a cheerful heart as God wants me to have. And a cheerful heart comes about by dealing with those things that are wrong in the right way, coping with them. If something is wrong and I can change it, I do it. If something
It's 49
is wrong,
degrees.
You know, friends, there is no sweeter feeling than the feeling of being loved. Let's look at perfect love today from the Bible and how you can have it right here on Book, Chapter, and Verse.
Those wonderful words of life, beautiful words, wonderful words of life.
Welcome to Book, Chapter, and Verse. My name is Jeff Archie, and I'm so glad that you've joined me today.
Back button. Stream and track information button. Cellular 404 bar control center. Calculate timer selected. Screen recording